The year is 1967. A film set in Hong Kong hums with equipment and whispered gossip. Bruce Lee, weighing barely 135 pounds, stands in the center of a makeshift ring. Across from him towers a man nearly 3 times his size, a 300-pound extra hired specifically to test whether Lee's martial arts skill is authentic or performance. The crew has stopped working. Cameras aren't rolling. This isn't rehearsal. This is real, and everyone knows it. The big man grins. He's been in street fights, wrestling matches, underground tournaments. He's never lost to someone half his weight. Lee doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His eyes say everything. This is the story of the moment Bruce Lee proved his speed wasn't just Hollywood magic. It was survival. But to understand why this test happened at all, we need to go back 3 years. By 1964, Bruce Lee had already made enemies, not in the traditional sense. He didn't disrespect masters or break dojo codes. His crime was simpler and far more dangerous. He taught Kung Fu to non-Chinese students. In San Francisco's Chinatown, this was unforgivable. The traditional masters saw him as a traitor. They wanted him stopped, so they issued a challenge. If Lee lost, he would have to close his school and stop teaching Westerners forever. Lee accepted. The fight lasted 11 minutes. Witnesses say it felt like an eternity. Lee won, but barely. He was exhausted, winded, frustrated. He realized something terrifying that day. Being right wasn't enough. Being skilled wasn't enough. He needed to be faster, unstoppable, untouchable. I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, Lee would later say. But I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. A man who relied purely on size and brute strength. Someone who didn't know Lee's techniques. Someone who wouldn't hold back. They found him on the same set. A bodybuilder turned stuntman. 6'4", over 300 pounds of muscle. The kind of man who moved furniture for fun and bent steel pipes in his spare time. He wasn't a trained fighter, but he didn't need to be. He had gravity and mass on his side. The crew gathered. No one said much. Lee stood in the center of the space, loose and breathing steadily. The big man stretched his shoulders and cracked his neck. Someone explained the rules, or rather the lack of them. It was simple. The big man would try to grab Lee, hold him, control him, prove that size matters more than speed. If he succeeded, the myth would die. Lee would be exposed as just another actor, just another performer. Lee nodded. He didn't argue, didn't negotiate. He simply took his stance. Weight on the back foot, hands low and open, eyes calm, but Lee was already gone, not backward, sideways, a single step angled at 45 degrees. The big man's arms closed on empty air. Before he could reset, Lee's hand shot forward, a straight punch to the solar plexus. Not hard enough to injure, just enough to send a message. The big man stumbled. Lee was back in his original position before the man even registered what happened. The big man roared and charged like a linebacker, full speed, all his weight behind it. This was the moment. If Lee failed to move, he'd be crushed. But Lee didn't move backward. He moved through. He slipped to the inside, redirected the man's momentum with one hand and struck with the other. A palm strike to the chest. The big man's feet left the ground, just for a second, just enough. He crashed onto his back, the air exploding from his lungs. Lee stood over him, not gloating, not angry. Just watching, waiting to see if the man wanted to continue. The big man raised one hand, not to strike, to surrender. He sat up slowly, shaking his head in disbelief. Lee extended a hand and helped him to his feet. Lee smiled back. You were grabbing for where I was, not where I would be. Speed isn't about moving fast, it's about moving first. And knowing when not to move at all. Years later, Lee would face bigger challenges, larger opponents, higher stakes. But this moment, this quiet test on a film set, was the turning point. It proved what he had always believed. That martial arts wasn't about tradition or showmanship. It was about truth. about what actually works when everything is on the line. Knowing is not enough, we must apply, Lee once said. Willing is not enough, we must do. On that day in 1967, he did exactly that. He moved when others would freeze. He adapted when others would resist. And he proved that the greatest weapon isn't size or strength. It's the ability to see the fight before it happens, to be where your opponent isn't, to turn their power into their weakness. The big man never challenged Lee again, but he never forgot what he learned that day either. Neither did anyone else in that room. Because they witnessed something rare, not a fight, a demonstration, not of violence, of mastery. What would you have done in Lee's position? Faced with someone twice your size, would you rely on technique or hesitate? Sometimes the greatest victories aren't the ones we see coming. They're the ones we create in the space between a breath and a heartbeat.